All right. Welcome, everyone. We're going to kind of slow roll our welcome tonight and let everybody get a chance to jump in here. I see everybody rolling in, so welcome all of you that are joining. Welcome to the Sourcebooks October BookLight event. Tonight we are featuring 3 amazing authors to bring you thrills and chills and suspense. And we ask that you consider purchasing copies of any or all of their books from the independent bookstores that are listed on Eventbrite. When you do so, you will get a signed book plate and some swag. So we're making it extra special for you. Doing so supports our wonderful indies, our authors, and you get something special as well. So let me introduce tonight's fabulous lineup. We'll start with Claire McIntosh. Claire is the multi-award winning author of 5 best-selling novels. Translated into more than 40 languages, her books have sold in excess of 2 million copies worldwide, have been New York Times, USA Today, and international bestsellers, and have spent a combined total of 64 weeks on the Sunday Times bestseller chart. Her latest thriller, Hostage, a locked room thriller set on a 20-hour flight, was a Barnes & Noble pick of the month. And this fall sees the launch of a murder mystery series beginning with The Last Party. Claire, can you tell us a little bit about your book?
I would love to. So I'm joining you from North Wales in the UK, where it's almost midnight, hence the headphones, my kids are asleep. And in my town is a big lake with a mountain above it, and that's where The Last Party is set. In the book, there's a fictional border that runs through the middle of the lake. On the one side is a tiny Welsh village full of secrets and people who have lived there forever. And on the English side is a very, very expensive luxury resort of log cabins overlooking the lake, full of rich English people behaving atrociously. On New Year's Eve, there's a big party to cement relationships between the two sides, but somebody ends up dead, and that kickstarts a cross-border murder investigation between Detective Constable Ffion Morgan, who is a Welsh detective, and her English counterpart, Leo Brady, who is hot. That's The Last Party.
Thank you, Claire. Ashley Winstead is the author of both thrillers and romance. She holds a PhD in contemporary American literature from Southern Methodist University and a BA in English and art history from Vanderbilt University. She lives in Houston, Texas, where she drinks red wine and dreams up novels. Ashley, can you please tell us about your book?
It's just as impressive a bio as Claire. Yeah, so I'm so happy to be here. It is an honor to be here with you all. This is going to be so fun. I am going to steal my friend Amy Gentry's description for The Last Housewife, because annoyingly she described it a lot better than I have. So The Last Housewife is Eyes Wide Shut, told from the perspective of Nicole Kidman. If it went to all the wild, far out places that we wish Eyes Wide Shut would have gone to. It is a cult revenge thriller that is loosely based on the real life NXIVM and Sarah Lawrence sex cults. And it opens with a woman named Shay DeRoy. Now, Shay has a very dark and troubled past that she thinks she has put a very solid lock on. She is lounging by the pool one day when she presses play on the latest episode of her favorite true crime podcast, because she's addicted like most of us are. And the subject of this latest episode turns out to be the mysterious death of a woman named Laurel Hargrove, whose body was found hanging on a college campus. Laurel just so happens to be Shay's estranged best friend from college, and that campus is their alma mater. So in that moment, Shay realizes that all the horrors that she thought she left behind are very much alive, and that she might be the key to not only uncovering the truth about Laurel, but getting justice. So this begins really a kind of epic investigative quest for her that takes her to like right into the seedy, brutal underworld of the rich and powerful in the Hudson Valley. So it is a book about power, about the way women make themselves small. It is a book about the power of telling your own stories, and it's got horror, romance, twists, and glamour.
Excellent. Absolutely wonderful. And now we have actor, director, producer Eric LaSalle, who is best known to worldwide television audiences for his award-winning portrayal of the commanding Dr. Peter Benton on the critically acclaimed and history-making medical drama ER. Educated at Juilliard and NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, his credits range from Broadway to film roles opposite Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo, and Hugh Jackman in Logan. LaSalle has maintained a prolific acting career while at the same time working steadily as a director, taking the helm for HBO, Showtime, NBC, Fox, and CBS. He remains a valued member of the Dick Wolf Entertainment Camp after 4 years of executive producer and director on Chicago PD, in addition to directing episodes of Law and Order and Law and Order Organized Crime. Eric wrote an episode of The Twilight Zone, which made WGA's list of 101 best written TV series. He lives in Los Angeles, California. And Eric, please tell us about your book.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm just honored to be here in such esteemed company. So thank you guys for having me. So Laws of Depravity came about, I read an article, and it wasn't, I guess, that well known. It sort of it's not written in the Bible, but I didn't know, and most people don't know, that all of Jesus's disciples were brutally murdered. They were beheaded, they were hanged, they were crucified, they were torn limb by limb. They died in horrible, horrible fashion. And so I was thinking if there's a way to turn this into a contemporary serial killer that emulated these killings. And so I came up with this story where of course, modern day serial killer by the name of Degler basically starts, and he comes out, he's been on a killing spree for 30 years. And each year, whenever he'll kill for a year, and then he'll go away and hide for 10, and he comes back. So what he does is he's killing clergy in different cities. So he started in San Francisco, he went to Boston, he went to Chicago. And so now this last cycle is taking place in New York, where we introduce our two protagonists. It's very much the style of the book and the tone is very much in the genre of the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. And so these two detectives have this great reputation of being the best closers. One's name is Quincy Cavanaugh, who's Italian-Irish American, and then his partner is an African-American by the name of Fee Freeman. And so they're the best closers. So they get this case once priests and clergy start turning up killed in these horrible fashions. And they are then joined by a female FBI agent by the name of Janet Macklin. And so it's the three of them pursuing this killer that's been killing for 30 years and has killed already 36 priests. So each time the cycle of killing, he kills 12 clergymen. So it's emulating sort of the Last Supper type thing. So he kills 12, and then he goes underground, and then comes for 10 years, and then he comes back. So this is the last cycle. So the stakes are very high, and it's up to our team to go after them. And one thing is they have their own demons that they're trying to work out in the process of chasing this master demon. So that's pretty much it.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. But perfect books for the spooky season reading.
Yes.
Now we come to the very fun part of our evening, my favorite part. Our authors are going to interview each other dinner party style. And when they're finished, I will come back and I will ask them your questions. So everyone watching, if you have questions as you're listening along, please put them into the Q&A box, not the chat, but the Q&A. And when they're done talking to each other, I will bounce back and we'll ask your questions. So we're going to start off with our dinner party with Ashley interviewing Claire, and I'll be back when everybody's done.
All right. Hi,
Hi.
Claire.
Well, it's really nice to chat with you. How are you doing?
Thank you. I am so good. Thank you for staying up well into your evening.
It's really late.
Yeah, this is a really late night dinner party that we're having right here with you. So I, like Mary said, dinner party questions. I hope that you will still want to go to a dinner party with me after I ask you these questions, because they're a little bit, they've got some substance. I'm going to be that person asking questions at the dinner party. But I just want to start by saying, oh my God, I love The Last Party so much. It is absolutely incredible. I devoured it. I could not put it down. I shirked so much work in order to read this book.
Bless you.
So.
This is the kind of dinner party I like. This is worth staying up for.
Yeah. No, it is just so incredible. Okay, so I'm like so excited to ask you questions, and they're gonna have to like hook me and pull me off stage. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you is something you alluded to in your description, your pitch for the book, which is that the setting, this absolutely incredible setting of this lake, where we've got Wales on one side, England on another, and this is really contentious luxury lodges here, the shore. And so much in this book is about the tensions between the Welsh and the English. And so you've got your two leads, of course, Ffion, who's Welsh, and Leo, who's hot and English. And you have, just so much tension between, England and Wales in this community. I think even at one point, one of your characters says, underneath it all, it's always about England and Wales. That's kind of under the surface at all times. And I just thought that was so brilliant. So can you talk to us about why you chose this kind of geopolitical tension to really center in your book and what it brings to this thriller?
Yeah, sure. Well, because this is what I live. So I am an English person who lives in Wales. I moved to Wales 6 years ago with my family. I dropped my kids, who were then 9, 8, and 8, into a Welsh-speaking school. So they have all their education in Welsh. They didn't speak Welsh. So it was like, moving to France or Germany. So suddenly they were being educated in Welsh. So now I have bilingual kids who kind of identify as Welsh. I'm English, I speak Welsh, but it's, the community tensions I find really interesting, because this is a very small country that has effectively been colonized for a really, really long time by England. And that leads to some really, really deep-seated feelings of resentment that I feel all the time. And you have to be very careful, I think, when you move into a town or you live very close to a border with a marginalized community. And so that was very much the root of the book. And what I wanted to get across was how important that culture is, the language, the identity of being Welsh, but also how that has to coexist alongside another country, because you can't really, this tiny country can't really survive without another one next to it. So it was very much inspired by my local area, although if I talk to my neighbours, I tell them that it's absolutely not based on here at all.
I love that. Yeah, I gotta keep your deniability.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, that is so fabulous. And I could have spent just 11 books worth of time in the setting, in the gorgeous setting of
Well, you
the
see,
last
I'm really
party.
happy to hear that, because
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'll be writing at least 11 books.
Yes.
I've
okay.
never written a series before. Like for me, my ideas normally start with concepts. It's kind of a question I want to answer, and so this is the first book that started from a place, and that's why it's
Ooh.
become a series. So it feels like, I feel like I'm really new now. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
starting again, learning how to write, because I've never written this type of book before, never written a series. So it's all quite peculiar.
Oh my gosh, can I poke a little bit more without spoilers
Yeah.
about what you're envisioning for this series and what it might look like? Is the thing that is going to be this, are the characters, are we going to follow the same
Yeah, so
characters or?
yeah, it's hard, because I think if I had intended to write the series, I probably would have planned it a bit better. Um, but because it was an accidental series, because I got kind of maybe a third of the way through the book and suddenly realized that this was a world, and Ffion was a detective that I was going to need to come back to, and that I felt readers would come back to. So I kind of fell into the series, and now what I'm finding as I work on the second book is that it's weirdly restrictive writing a series, because you've so like, say I want my characters to go to the nearest town, and that nearest town is set in stone now, because I've said where it is. I know exactly what the geography is, and I'm like, oh no, they can't do that, there isn't enough time. So I'm keeping my central characters, my police characters, and a couple of the villagers, but the focus moves a little bit. So it's not around the holiday lodges, it's up in the mountains. The first book, The Last Party, is very much around the lake, the water. And what I'm writing now is set in the mountains. It's a reality TV show that's being filmed in the mountains. And a murder, of course, a murder happens there. So I'm having fun with it, but I am definitely feeling my way into how to write a series, and actually I'm hoping for some top tips from Eric. That's it's the only reason I'm here.
I love that, and you're off to an amazing start. And I'm so happy to hear that Ffion is going to be around a little bit more. So my next question for you, and I totally cheated with that one, but my next question for you is, so we have these, kind of these larger political tensions and conflicts that are kind of suffusing the atmosphere, and then so much of what's at the heart of The Last Party are family contentions and family strife and dysfunctional families, kind of taking that idea of conflict and bringing it down to this really personal level. So I'd love to hear you talk about what kind of compelled you to write so many different kinds of dysfunctional families, and to really kind of center that in this book.
I guess, Ashley, it's because I have 3 teenagers, and this feels pretty dysfunctional sometimes. I think families are just at the heart of everything, don't you think? Like relationships, everything comes back to relationships, whether that is relationships with your colleagues or your parents or your kids or your partner. So many crimes happen as a result of relationships, and the way that we react to situations, it very much depends on our circumstances. So I'm just really interested in people. And I was a police officer for 12 years. And so I spent a lot of time talking to people, talking to victims of crime and witnesses and suspects, and, listening to people lie and make excuses and justify their actions. And a lot of that, I suppose, ends up in my writing. And in The Last Party, because it's set in a small town, small towns are really interesting places, I think, because if you've lived and grown up in a small town and you still live there as an adult, you never quite shake off the kid that you were. Like, people still talk to you the way they talked to you when you were young, and you can't quite move on. And everyone I've ever met who lives in a small town has this kind of weird conflict where they love their small town because they love the fact that they know everyone and, you know, they've got history, but they also hate the fact that they know everyone, and they, you know, they kind of can't wait to leave. And Ffion is very much like that. So it's yeah, I guess it's something that comes from my experience of living in small town and my experience as a police officer.
Oh my gosh, that just hit me. I'm going to see my family this weekend, and I know the minute I
Be
like,
dysfunctional.
yeah, yeah, sorry for any family that's watching. But the dysfunction more the like, I know I'm gonna revert to, you know, 17-year-old Ashley, like the minute I get back. And all those old dynamics, like you were saying, is so true, just spring right back. That's so interesting.
Oh, thank you, Ashley. Great
Yeah.
questions.
Oh, of course. Yeah, and I think maybe I have a minute to ask you one more.
Go for it.
Okay, so my last question is simply fun. So this book starts off with a bang at a New Year's Eve party. What ideal way would you spend New Year's Eve?
Oh, that's easy. I would be asleep. Hate New Year's Eve. I hate the expectation. The best New Year's Eves I've had have been entirely spontaneous. The minute you plan something, it all goes horribly wrong. It doesn't necessarily end up in murder as it does in the last party. But no, I will go to bed at 10 o'clock. I'll put earplugs in and I will have the best night's sleep. That's my perfect New Year.
Love it. Thank you so much, Claire. I love your book.
Thank you. Thank you. Come on up, Eric. You are next in the hot spot.
Okay, there we go. I'm here. Hello.
How are you doing? You okay?
How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. So tell me, Eric, I'm really keen to know how your experience as an actor, a director, a producer, how that feeds in to writing novels, and like, what are the similarities? What are the differences?
I mean, I don't know. I try not to, I mean, I'm blessed to do various things. I think instead of looking at them in contrast, I always look at them in harmony. And so, you know, look, I'm a storyteller. And I think every time I take on a new discipline, it informs my ability to be a better storyteller. So obviously being an actor, that's a certain type of storyteller. Then when I graduated to becoming a director, that helped me as a director because I knew the things that I was hungry for as an actor. So I was able to provide those things, I think, for actors. And so I have over the years, developed a reputation of being an actor's director. When I started producing, it's the same thing. You understand how actors are treated and directors, etc. And then when I started writing novels, it's basically just, again, taking everything that I had learned there. Obviously, this allows us to this form and this discipline allows us to get into characters' heads, unlike any discipline like screenplays. You know, everything is so visual. Here we get to really delve deeper. And I think that ironically, although I've written, you know, maybe a dozen screenplays, I felt as soon as I started writing novels, I said that I think I'm a much better novelist than I am a screenwriter, which was ironic because I had more experience. But I think I live in this place of really understanding how people think, the human mind, the human condition, and that comes from all these years of being an actor, et cetera. But now being able to have the motivation, to have the history, et cetera. So they all feed each other in a very positive.
Yeah. So you kind of you're in a way you're sort of inhabiting your characters in the same way that you would if you were performing them.
Yes, very much. And writing, you know, me writing is not always pretty. And sometimes you know, my assistant might come and I'm talking to myself or I'm acting, you know, that's just how I do it. So that actor always lives there. But yeah, it's really just kind of understanding how you inhabit and wants and needs. And it has a lot to do with I was fortunate to have a classical training in theater and studying the masters, Chekhov, Shakespeare, Ibsen, and just being able to understand more about character. So now as a novelist, you always want to have that sort of classic depth to your characters, things that reach a little more subtextual and much more interesting. So that definitely is an influence.
I like the idea of you being like a method writer, like you're a method actor. I've got visions of you now kind of performing at your desk. Are you in your writing space now?
No, I'm not. I write everywhere. I live in California, so of course the weather's always beautiful. So 6 a.m. in the morning, 7 a.m. I'm outside, sitting in the garden, working for a few hours, and then I'll come in as the sun moves. I move. So I write all over, but for the most part, I just get a lot of energy from outside and being in nature and, doing it that way. So I don't, the traditional office I can do, but I'm either on a sofa, I'm either outside, so it's
Eric, it's very bad for your back writing on a sofa. You can't do that. When you sit down to write, do you know exactly what you're going to write? Have you got it all plotted out in your head, or do you just go where the muse takes you?
I go where the music takes me because I've just found, I know a lot of writers do index cards and boards, and I have such a respect for that because that's so disciplined. I am so not that. But for me, it's been very beneficial because the sense of discovery. And I love writing and not always know, I don't even always know the character's fate. And there's a thing that I think a lot of writers understand, that I hope readers start understanding. Sometimes a writer lets the character plead for their life. And sometimes the writer lets make a case why you should be around. I take it one step further and enable the ability to write a series is because I've allowed characters that might be seemingly small in one book to then emerge as a major character in the next book, because I just fell in love with them. Like all of a sudden, they just started developing to something really cool that I hadn't even necessarily foreseen, hadn't planned. But I'm like, oh, I like this character, and I've had characters that I was going to kill, and started liking them more and going, ooh, and then I've had, some of my readers go, people that, when I give them this thing and say, what do you think of this? They're like, you better not kill that character. So that's a character really fighting for, and I go with it as opposed to planning it. I just like to see how they evolve. And then it becomes sort of this like give and take where they give me more, I give them more, etc. So that's how I work.
Okay, right. So as a new series writer, I am taking serious notes. This is all really valuable. Tell me about Kavanagh and Freeman, and Macklin as well. So you've written. Firstly, tell me about your choice to write female characters and how that felt, whether that was a conscious decision or whether the characters just evolved. And tell us a bit more about these three central characters of yours.
Well, addressing the female thing, I was raised by a single mother, so I think the concept of female heroes is sort of always in me, and I've always, my mother was my hero, so there are always these elements, and I've managed to have some really cool, smart, dynamic women in my life as agent, assistants, whatever, like people that I can learn from. So I'm always intrigued by that. I try not to necessarily write female characters much differently than I write male characters. They kick ass, they are flawed, they're all of these things, and then of course you get feedback from many people on my support team are female, so they authenticate. Yes, a woman would know, a woman would never do that, and so you learn, as opposed to being, I think a lot of male writers are sort of cocky and just assume they know everything there is to write about women, and being African American and growing up and seeing how often our characters were handled, and white directors or white writers just assuming they knew everything about Blacks, and you go, that's not authentic. So I respect that. And coming from a show like ER, coming from a show like Chicago PD, we have technical advisors that really make us disciplined in the truth and the history, et cetera. So I come from that. Quincy is African-American. I'm sorry, Quincy is Irish-Italian. And so each story for the first 3 books, it emulates sort of the concept of repertory theater. When you see repertory theater, one night an actor could be playing Othello, and then the next night they do another play where he has 5 lines. So I do a very similar thing where each book, one of the characters stands out a little bit more than the other 2, but the other 2 have a great presence, but it's through that point of view. So the first book, I chose for it to be Quincy Kavanaugh's point of view. It was also important to me that even though I have a very dynamic, amazing African-American character, it was important for me to be taken seriously as a novelist, that I did not lean into, this is a Black franchise. So I started with something more challenging and more difficult. And so Quincy Kavanaugh, it's his story because we are pursuing a serial killer that's killing priests. And Quincy Kavanaugh happens to have been raised Catholic and was molested by a priest. So it gives
So he's got that personal investment in that story.
And the dilemma of, is this guy doing something right by killing, someone who's a pedophile? The next book is from Fee's point of view, who's African American, and his father is considered to be the Black Godfather of Harlem. So his father is a very successful criminal who has now gone legit, but he's done some really horrible things, on his rise, and some of them have come back now in the second book, and Fee has to deal with that. The third book is going to be stronger in Macklin's point of view, and Macklin is Jewish or part Jewish, and there's a lot of the crimes are anti-Semitic crimes, and so again she has this identity where she hasn't fully embraced her Jewishness and her culture, but through this, of course, as she sees it, she starts growing. So I choose to do it that way, and then there's some nice surprises where smaller characters have become much bigger, and that's my franchise.
And we can't wait to see what those surprises are. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And I just wish we were sitting around a real dinner party together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So I guess it's my turn now. Where are you? There you are.
There I am.
So, Ashley, let's talk about this.
Should I apologize to start?
No. You are talking to the right person. So it's funny because a lot of times, when people, I don't know if you go through this, but when people read my stuff, they start all of a sudden looking at you a little differently and questioning, how dark is this person really, and how, and so I had an old assistant, and her mother loved the book, but she was like, keep an eye on him, so when I read your book, I was like, okay, a little kindred spirit of darkness here. So let's talk about cults. Why did you decide to write about cults? What type of research did you do about cults? How much of what you learn is actually directly from some of your study of cult, and that in actuality happened? I know this is very much the Sarah Lawrence scandal and the other, and so I get that, and that's a beautiful handprint and interesting world, and seeing the sort of evolution of, because that's the thing that I think people don't understand, is how does one get you to submit to a cult, and not just physically, but mentally to truly, and I'm not going to spoil about the ending, but that was the epitome of submission and brainwashing, etc. So anyway, so as far as research, as far as why cults, what did you use from things that you've learned in research?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's an amazing question. Thank you. I'm so glad to be talking with a kindred spirit. So you kind of hit the nail on the head, but with that, that the book is really preoccupied with not just the question of how can you get someone to submit physically, but that mental, that psychological aspect of what does it take to go from maybe point A to point B, where you're kind of handing over your autonomy and your will to another person. And I have been fascinated by cults for a really long time because I'm really fascinated by group dynamics. My thriller that I wrote before The Last Housewife had a really large ensemble cast, and I loved thinking about the way that group of friends in my first book kind of performed almost like a mini cult with, everyone started kind of having the same group think. And so coming off that book, thinking about book 2, which is The Last Housewife, I really wanted to press deeper on that. And I went down this rabbit hole of becoming addicted to watching, I think we watched like a spate of cult documentaries erupt for a little while. So there was The Vow, there was all the NXIVM news coming out. At the time, the Sarah Lawrence story was really underreported. I would say there wasn't a whole ton about it. Now, I think Peacock's coming out with a documentary about Larry Ray, the Sarah Lawrence sex cult leader. I always stumble saying that because I'm like, oh, sorry, Mom. But I think my attraction to both the NXIVM and Sarah Lawrence stories was that like something about these cults felt different and, dare I say, modern. It felt like not the cult that I was familiar with, like the, religious sect that had secluded itself somewhere in the wild or in the rural or in Waco, here in Texas. But these networks of people who were kind of operating both above and underground. And all of these women so many of these women are either college students on the cusp of like their adult lives at Sarah Lawrence, at, arguably one of the more progressive universities in the country, or they were actresses or heiresses in the instance of NXIVM. So you have these people with power, these women with power, hard power, financial power. And I think that, for better or worse, just made me think like we're in the 21st century. You've got power. What makes you hand it over to these men? Like what about that? What is the attraction? And being the dark-minded soul that we are, I wanted to know. I wanted to kind of embody, and like you said in your interview with Claire, inhabit really what that would look like, and all the different ways that you could be really lured and seduced. And so I just did a ton of research into both those cults, but also the psychology of how cult leaders tend to lure in, hook their victims, hook their followers, and bring them in. So some of the brutal aspects that are real life events, and I won't spoil anything in the book, but some are fictional, but some I pulled directly from these real life stories. And I think part of it was like, to what you said earlier, people looking at you different. I wanted to be able to be like, I swear I didn't make, this is real. I didn't make all of this up. It really happened.
Right. So something that you did that I appreciated, I learned in theater school, one of the first things they said to us at 18 years old, don't judge your characters. It's just your job as the artist to present the characters. I lean towards, and again, you and I are kindred spirits in this, I lean towards heavily flawed heroes. So with Shay, who is your protagonist, a very interesting, flawed character. She's not perfect. She's somewhere in between. Look, at the end of the day, yes, she's ultimately a victim. Let's definitely get that out. But there's also this, she's repulsed, she's equally repulsed and captivated by this whole concept. So here's this, like you said, this amazingly bright woman with power, and she's beautiful, and she's married to this powerful man, and she's got all of this stuff going on. And yet there is this undercurrent of darkness and things that's unresolved. And this is who you hang your hat on and say, carry us through the story. So why was it important for you to have a character who is as flawed, as complex, as contradictory? And especially, I mean, the end was like, I kept going, I don't want to give it away, but I kept going back and forth. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Is it going to, and so why make this the character that brings us through an already dark world, but for her to be so interestingly, so beautifully flawed, which is like, I like to think that way.
Thank you so much. That was also just a beautiful read of Shay. So through Shay, I'll be completely transparent that I was really exploring my own relationship to patriarchy, the ways that I am both repulsed by and attracted to, admittedly, kind of patriarchal power systems, patriarchal reward cycles, of like, perform this way and you will be judged beautiful and powerful and good, and people will pat you on the head, and all of these things that are, for Shay, really at the heart of why she finds herself kind of lured in to this cult called the Pater Society in the book. And so I think I write what you know, they say, and so that there will never be a character I write that is not deeply flawed in a lot of ways. But it was so cathartic for me and such a powerful experience for me to write a woman like Shay, who was so imperfect, so flawed, so aware of it, so desperate for redemption and desperate to understand herself and untangle herself from these systems of kind of power and submission, while she derives pleasure from it at the same time. So it brings me a lot of joy to hear from readers who have said that kind of journey was cathartic for them too.
Yes. Now, so you chose to tell a major part of your story through the whole podcast setup, the transcripts of the podcast, which was very different. Like I've never read anything with that, or from that approach. What led you to that? And I mean, obviously, look, it fits because our second protagonist is, of that world. But to go that far, what led you to that? And what, like, did that give you a certain type of freedom? Did that give you another way of giving the reader information that they might not have normally gotten? What were the benefits and what were the challenges of telling the story that way?
Yeah, it was, I knew I wanted to do it. I wanted to challenge myself to write a book that kind of braided different forms of narrative together, because when I've seen other writers do it, I thought, wow, that's really cool. I want to try my hand at this. And this is a book about telling your own story, learning to do that, and kind of the way that storytelling can make people cohesive and understandable to themselves and to other people in ways that, without that story stitching cause and effect and context together, remains illegible. So Shay, for her, she thinks this thing that Jamie, who's the podcast host she partners with, the thing he does with true crime podcasts, which I believe of true crime podcasts, that's really remarkable, is shining a light on people's stories, victim stories, and killer stories, and by putting evidence together and telling a narrative story about an event, really bringing a lot of understanding to the motives of both parties, victim and killer. And so I loved the idea that, you know, that theme would be of storytelling would be echoed through this kind of like really pared down, really stark, just two voices in a room almost is what you get with those transcript chapters. So there's like an intimacy there. And lastly, I knew that I was going to be covering a lot of dark and violent and graphic events in this book, that I was going to go to these places, and some of them unfold in, you know, the real time of the book. But as a way to soften some of that for my readers, I felt that having Shay recount it and have it just be coming through dialogue would serve that purpose of providing a safety net for the reader. So
you're very, yeah, very smart. All right, last question. I guess writers like you and I, or people like you and I, we don't necessarily scare ourselves. So I'm not going to ask you, you know, in writing this very dark, gritty, interesting, revealing story. Someone once told me, and I think this is very true. I actually kind of steal it and say, your art should tell on you.
yeah.
And I won't put you on blast or anything like that, but not so much that you would necessarily scare yourself, but did you surprise yourself? And see, because I find it's the surprise element of us going someplace and having a certain feeling that, oh, I didn't know that I would have that feeling as I'm exploring this character or this subject. So my question is, you know, not so much did the darkness and the sexuality and the grit and the horror of this story scare you, but were there parts that surprised you as you were giving birth to it, and you know, how did that make you feel?
Oh my gosh, you just captured so beautifully why I write. And I will be stealing this from you later down the road. So yeah, this entire book was a journey of surprising myself and pushing myself deeper into places that felt like that surprised me and feeling like white hot discomfort, because I knew I was circling a truth. And you know, I was hoping and praying that, and having faith that other people would be out there on that limb with me in reading this book. But I would say really, really the kind of waffling back and forth between the attraction and repulsion of wanting to perform well, and trying to figure out like what's at the bottom of you as a person if you've taken off all those layers of performance and layers of what other people have told you, you know, your identity is, and that confronting if and what is at the center, if there is something there, you know, that's the thing that really surprised me, is how far I could take that in this book. Yeah, so telling on yourself is definitely the reason I write. Thank you for those questions, just amazing.
Oh, no, thank you for the book. So those are my dinner questions.
I love it.
This is why I love this format so much. I found myself like this, just listening to all of you talk to each other. Absolutely wonderful. Claire, can you come back? There you are.
Hi, Claire.
Hi.
So I know we have a lot of questions and not a lot of time. We're going to get through as many as we can. And the first one we're going to ask is for Ashley. This is from Donna. Your bad guys are really bad. Do you model these characters on living or historical people, or are they entirely a product of your imagination?
Oh, this is where I get into trouble, because I am going to say two things. One is that particularly for The Last House, for all my villains across my books, if I don't find the part of the villain that I share, if I don't pluck a part of myself and my, my fears and desires and the ugly parts of myself and put it in that villain, then I don't feel like I've written like a three-dimensional villain, or I can't really do it. So I'll confess to that. But I will also say for The Last Housewife in particular, you meet a lot of villains in this book. And I actually based each one off someone, a man that I have met and known in my life. And so interestingly, it has turned out to be kind of a parade of the many various kinds of misogyny that I have experienced. Yes, hence my line at the end of the acknowledgements that says, if you see yourself in this book and feel it's pointed at you, it is.
I love that answer. I love everything about it. Eric, this one is for you. As a director and producer, do you envision your book becoming a limited series, a movie? Is this something that's maybe in the works? And do you maybe have somebody in mind that would play your main characters?
Hell yes. That's what got me writing. A part of my journey and narrative in Hollywood and being an African-American artist is the importance of ownership and here, and also creating IP. And so I am the goal and the challenge was always being accepted as a legitimate author, but with the goal of I get a lot of feedback of people saying, that my writing is very cinematic. Well, of course, I've been influenced for several years, so my books have more of a cinematic approach to also help with the end goal, which is, yes, to turn it into, they've always been thought of as potential movies, television series, and yes, there are talks going on. So,
love to hear that. Absolutely. This next question is for Claire. How has your law enforcement background helped you creatively in writing in these genres?
So it obviously helps in terms of research. I don't have to do any because I know how to investigate a murder. That helps. But also police officers, detectives are storytellers. They're telling true stories, but they're having to find, if you're taking a witness statement from someone, you are being entrusted to find exactly the right words to write down what's happened. And a victim of crime doesn't start at the beginning. They don't give you beginning, middle, end. They start at the end of a crime. They tell you what's just happened, the attack, the assault, the burglary, and you have to pull them back and find that backstory. And so that really taught me how to shape a story, how to present a story in a compelling way to an audience, to a courtroom. So there's that, but also I think it taught me how leveling life is, how fragile life is, and how we are all capable of doing terrible, terrible things. And my books tend to deal with good people who do bad things and bad people who, occasionally do good things.
Love it. Love all of this. I have one final question for each of you, and that is, what are you currently reading, or what have you read recently that has really stuck with you?
Wow. What am I obviously just read Ashley's book, so that's first and foremost. Paulo Coelho. I'm back to Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. I just reread, and never gets tired.
The Alchemist is such an awesome book. I am literally just rereading Livid by the queen of crime, Patricia Cornwell, because I'm interviewing her tomorrow. So I'm rereading that and writing lots of questions for her. Brilliant book.
Excellent.
And I just finished Other Than the Last Party, which was incredible. I Love It When You Lie by the author Kristen Bird. And this is her sophomore thriller, and it opens with 4 sisters standing over a freshly dug grave, and they're shoveling dirt into it. And then you spool back to try to figure out who's in the grave and what happened to get them there. And it was fabulous.
Love it. Love all of this. I'm afraid that is all the time we have this evening. Thank you everyone who joined us for this amazing conversation. A reminder that when you buy their books, and you've got to want to buy every one of these authors' books, when you buy them from one of the stores listed on Eventbrite, you will get a signed book plate and swag. So please do support our independent bookstores and get your signed copies of the book plates and the swag. Next month's BookLight event is taking place next week. Join us November 3rd at 6 p.m. Central for the authors Shauna Robinson, Anne Davila Cardinal, and Iman Harari Kia. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Buy these books. They will get you covered for all of your spooky season needs. Hope to see you all next week. Good night and good reading, and thanks for joining.
It was a
Thank
pleasure
you
meeting
all.
all of you.
Bye.
Nice
Thank
to meet
you.
you.
Best of luck. All right. Bye-bye.